Welcome to the first virtual NAFB convention. Your session will begin momentarily. Before we begin this session of the first ever virtual NAFB convention, we would like to make a few acknowledgments. Thank you to BASF for sponsoring the virtual convention platform. BASF has been a sponsor of the NAFB for more than 30 years, and we appreciate their continued partnership. Did you know that by attending this session today, you'll receive points with the NAFB Virtual Convention game, brought to you by Anuvia Plant Nutrients? Be sure to check the leaderboard on the site. The top 5 participants will receive gift cards. Before we begin this session, I'd like to remind everyone of a couple of things. Be sure to use the hashtag NAFB20 on all of your social media posts. And the NAFB Foundation auction also continues online. Be sure to utilize the proxy bid system to secure your bids today. We would like to send a big thank you to Corteva for sponsoring the video production of this session. Welcome to the first virtual NAFB convention. Your session will begin momentarily. Before we begin this session of the first ever virtual NAFB convention, we would like to make a few acknowledgments. Thank you to BASF for sponsoring the virtual convention platform. BASF has been a sponsor of the NAFB for more than 30 years, and we appreciate their continued partnership. Did you know that by attending this session today, you'll receive points with the NAFB Virtual Convention game, brought to you by Anuvia Plant Nutrients? Be sure to check the leaderboard on the site. The top 5 participants will receive gift cards. Before we begin this session, I'd like to remind everyone of a couple of things. Be sure to use the hashtag NAFB20 on all of your social media posts. And the NAFB Foundation auction also continues online. Be sure to utilize the proxy bid system to secure your bids today. We would like to send a big thank you to Corteva for sponsoring the video production of this session.
Well, thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for this Newsmaker session. Hope you're all enjoying this virtual NAFB convention so far. Really excited about the conversation we're about to have here today. Before we get going, I want to just introduce myself. I'm Spencer Chase. I currently have the honor of serving as the Vice President on the board of the National Association of Farm Broadcasting. Before we begin today, would like to recognize the session sponsor of this session in our conversation with National FFA CEO Mark Peschel. Sponsor of this session is Indigo Ag. A few acknowledgments as well. We want to thank BASF for sponsoring the virtual convention platform. BASF has been a sponsor of NAFB events for more than 30 years, and we appreciate their continued partnership. And by attending this session today, you do receive points with the NAFB virtual convention game brought to you by Anuvia Plant Nutrients. And make sure to check the leaderboard on the site and see if you're in that top 5 that will receive gift cards. And if not, get yourself in that top 5. But now we'll hear a short message from our session sponsor, Indigo Ag.
Indigo's mission is to harness nature to help farmers sustainably feed the planet.
Agriculture has existed relatively unchanged for more than 100 years. Taking on this task of changing agriculture requires a really diverse set of people and employees.
The Indigo culture is a culture that's built on honesty and integrity.
The atmosphere at Indigo is
uplifting,
collegial,
energizing,
innovative, fresh, and inspiring.
The Google of agriculture.
Pretty amazing.
I feel inspired by my peers here every day. There has never been a question that I had where I couldn't get somebody to spend time teaching me what I needed to know.
They're smart, passionate people who aren't afraid to try new things.
Everyone is so driven and very focused on our mission.
A typical project might have someone who spent time doing strategy for a global company, legal people, a chemical engineer, all approaching the same problem from different directions.
There's definitely a role for you here.
You can be an account manager out working with growers,
an agronomist,
logistics coordinator,
a scientist,
a continuous improvement person,
a rice platform coordinator, grower customer service representative.
The people who work at Indigo are incredible. It makes coming to work at Indigo such an honor.
We are known here at Indigo for hiring ambitious, interesting, disruptive people. They are the reason that I look forward to coming to work every day.
Agriculture is the world's most important technology. It employs 40% of the global workforce. It supports $3+ trillion of global markets. Its product is us.
To be able to directly think, wow, what I'm working on is in support of disrupting this whole system to make it better is really inspiring.
We're working on thousands and thousands of acres globally. We really are making a difference.
We are transforming the way the food is produced.
Whether you're in New York City or here in the middle of Texas, what we do in agriculture has an effect on your life.
We have the potential to truly bring consumer preference to the forefront.
We're really trying to change an industry that's really the bedrock of the entire world.
We're really passionate about food and health and wellness here.
Indigo's commitment to health and wellness is consistent with our mission. That's important for employee health and productivity.
Indigo's commitment to health and wellness means walking the walk and talking the talk.
They help us with gym memberships, healthy meals, group fitness classes, and
stand-up desks.
They really do want the best for us.
It's obvious that they care.
I joined Indigo because it was a technology company that was attempting something different.
As I came from a farming community and family,
they're actually focusing on farmer profitability and creating sustainability that we can actually see and verify.
It inspires me to grow in a different way.
To be a part of history in the making.
To be a part of something bigger than myself.
We all start off every day on the same page, focused on making agriculture better.
We hear all the time when people walk into our office is that they can just feel the energy.
If you think that harnessing nature to help farmers sustainably feed the planet is one of the most important things that we could be working on, and if you're willing to work intensely to achieve that, then you're going to have a hard time finding a better combination than Indigo.
Thanks again to Indigo Ag for that session sponsorship. Also want to thank Pivot Bio for sponsoring our afternoon refreshment break. Before we begin the session, I'd like to remind everyone of a couple things. Be sure to use in your social media posts the hashtag NAFB20 on all of your social media posts. The NAFB Foundation auction also continues online, and don't forget you could use that proxy bid system to secure your bids. Set high, aim high, remain high in your bids. Finally, thank you to Corteva for sponsoring the video production of this session. And now, without further ado, we'll introduce the newsmaker, the speaker here at this session, and that, of course, is National FFA CEO Mark Peschel. Mark is the Chief Executive Officer of both the FFA organization and foundation, where he is responsible for overall operations, strategic development, and execution, and ensuring the long-term success of both of those entities. Prior to his time at FFA, Mark spent 33 years in the animal nutrition industry. He began his career at Ralston Purina in 1983 as a manager of dealer financial services. He joined Carl Esaki Inc. in 1987, where he served as Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer, and Vice President of Operations. In 2000, Provimi Holding BV, a animal global nutrition company headquartered in the Netherlands, purchased Aki. North American Nutrition Company was formed as a result of the acquisition, and in 2007, Peschel was named President and CEO for Provimi's North American business. In 2009, Peschel was named Group Vice President for Provimi and relocated to Europe, where he assumed responsibility for business operations in North America, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. In 2011, he was a member of the executive team that sold Provimi to US-based Cargill, where he was named Vice President and Group Director at Cargill Animal Nutrition. And Peschel has a long run of experience within FFA prior to him joining the organization as its CEO in 2016. He was the 1978 and 1979 Nebraska State FFA president and earned a degree in agriculture from the University of Nebraska in 1983. He has been married to his wife, Nancy, for 39 years and enjoys family activities, sports, music, reading, and classic automobiles. So, Mark, without any further ado, I'd welcome you to the virtual podium here and would welcome your comments.
Thank you, Spencer. Thank you for that very kind introduction. I'm sure our guests are doing the math to try to figure out just how long ago it was that I was a state FFA president in the great state of Nebraska, and I will just say it's been a while. But with that said, thank you so much for the invitation to be here, and clearly thanks to all of those who've sponsored the session today. It's really a pleasure for me to be with NAFB. You folks are always very generous to National FFA, and we appreciate the time you provide to us, the exposure, as well as your support. Spencer mentioned that I came on board with National FFA back in 2016, and pretty early in my run, there were a number of items that I called out that I felt as the new CEO deserved my attention. There were some financial matters, there were some debt matters, there was some personnel and staffing and programming, a number of things that we tackled. But one of the first things I said is we need, as an organization, in order to maintain and elevate our relevance, to be a more inclusive, diverse, and equitable organization. We need to reach a broader base of young people, and truly we need to be a welcoming place for young people from all walks of life, from all parts of the country. And of course, FFA has a history of taking steps to enhance that relevance and enhance inclusion, diversity, and equity. In 1969, we invited young ladies to be a part of FFA. In fact, we've just celebrated the 50 years of women in our organization. Very proud of the fact that today we have about half of our membership as males, half as females. And so from 1969, we've made good progress. 1988, we moved from calling ourselves Future Farmers of America and began referring to ourselves as National FFA. Again, in the sense of trying to be more inclusive, trying to appeal to a broader base of young people. And today, about 40% of the FFA chapters in the country are now in urban centers, cities or suburbs. Of course, 60% of our programs continue to remain in rural areas, but the fact that FFA is now in 24 of the 25 largest cities in the country is significant for an agricultural youth organization. But the subject of inclusion, diversity, and equity, We really began work in earnest in 2017 to ask questions, to gain insights from stakeholders, from teachers, from students. We did task forces, we did focus groups, we did surveys that carried over into 2018 when we brought groups of ag education professionals to our headquarters and continued to have a dialogue about how can FFA be more effective in inclusion, diversity, and equity. In 2019, we devoted some additional staff time to inclusion, diversity, and equity, and we brought on a couple of external consultants, Millennium Learning, a Kentucky-based firm, as well as Studio 5 Learning, an organization that's based in San Francisco, to help us identify how we can more effectively take the message and enhance the training around inclusion, diversity, and equity to teachers, students, as well as our stakeholders. And since early 2000, we have continued our work with those consultants, and we have developed and identified structures for the way that we can proceed and how we can measure our progress as a result to our processes, practices, programs, and policies at National FFA. Not long ago, we introduced what we call the Agricultural Education for All Roadmap that identifies a number of areas where we feel FFA can take tangible steps forward on a national basis in order to be that welcoming and safe place for young people, for teachers, for alumni, for our stakeholders, where they can be celebrated as their authentic selves. And we've taken a number of steps, in fact, over the recent 3 or 4 years that are identified on that roadmap that we believe enhance FFA's inclusion, diversity, and equity platform. Truly, we want FFA to be a bully-free zone. We want and expect that our membership will reflect the demographics of the school systems and the FFA or the communities where those FFA chapters are located. We want to truly celebrate individuality and diversity. We want to be a place where we are tolerant, respectful of differences. And we truly want to be and feel we are and should be a place for everyone. And as I said earlier, we've made some progress. I think significantly, we have reached record membership of 760,000 members. And for the first time in our organization's history, 200,000 of those young people are young people of color. And that is one of the demographics that we can measure. I mentioned earlier the breakdown between males and females. But as we all know, inclusion, diversity, and equity is much more than just race and ethnicity and gender. It's about socioeconomic situations. It's about rural versus urban. It's about sexual identity. It's about religious preferences, and being a place where many different points of views can be shared and can be celebrated. So as we have introduced our roadmap that talks about those key points that FFA can take on to be a more inclusive, diverse, and equitable organization, we also realize that this work really happens at the local level. It's the teachers, the advisors in the local agricultural education and FFA chapter programs that make the big difference. And they're doing a whale of a job each and every day, particularly under the circumstances of the pandemic. And I salute them. But what we feel is by providing them with additional level of training and educational opportunities. In fact, we held a number of virtual seminars over the summer. We had over 500 teachers that participated in those seminars. And we've also reached thousands of young people through our virtual platforms at the National FFA Convention on the subject of inclusion, diversity, and equity. Truly, we believe that we can be better. We believe that inclusion, diversity, and equity is an opportunity to lift everyone up. In fact, one of the historical circumstances that we have spent some time evaluating is the 1965 merger between FFA and the New Farmers of America, which was in fact the FFA-like program that was available for African American youth in our country. And at the directive of the Department of Education at that time, those two organizations were brought together. And from what we have been able to gain, the individuals that we have surveyed and spoken to, there were certainly some mistakes made. And there are some opportunities that we believe are there for us to correct. And we are engaged in a robust dialogue with officials at North Carolina A&T University, where the NFA archives are held, where they have a great deal of interest, as do we, in reinitiating what was called the H.O. Sargent Award, and evaluating how we can digitize the archives of NFA and make those available to students so that we can all learn from our history. And that's just an example of a first step, a step we believe is necessary for FFA to reflect its being an organization that's relevant in the 21st century. And I would be remiss if I didn't identify and indicate another opportunity that we believe we have to make our mark on agriculture, and that is sustainability in agriculture. Hardly any of us go to a meeting where we don't have someone speak about the 9 to 10 billion people that will inhabit this earth in 29 or 30 years, and all those souls will need to be fed. The question is, how do we feed them, and how do we do that sustainably? Because we are using the resources of more than one earth to feed the 7 billion people that inhabit this planet today. We believe our young members can play a role in creating a more sustainable agriculture. And so we have partnered with an external consulting organization located in Chicago. We've provided training for about a third of our staff. 12 of our senior managers are now certified in sustainability. And we've just conducted a series of surveys and evaluations of the specific areas that our sponsors, our donors, our students, our teachers, our state staff members believe that we can make a difference. And so what we're looking at is developing a strategy that will be announced in Q2 next year. And it will revolve around how do we embed sustainability in all of FFA's programs, awards, degrees, and educational materials. How can we help students, one, understand what is sustainability, two, understand how to measure sustainability, and three, understand what they can do to have a positive impact on sustainability in agriculture. So along with inclusion, diversity, and equity that we say is not an initiative, it needs to be a way of life, we believe sustainability in agriculture and how we can bring students along that path is also a way of life for us moving into 2021. So Spencer, we've had an opportunity to evaluate a number of ways that we feel that we can produce the next generation of leaders that will truly change the world, truly change agriculture. And we think these two programs are critical for the relevance of FFA and to help us remain relevant for the future of agriculture.
Well, very good, Mark. Appreciate those thoughts and appreciate the update on some of the things going on at FFA. Want to start with a couple of questions on the diversity, not initiative, the diversity way of life, as you put it. You on one hand, you mentioned the 200,000 members of color. That's a growing demographic, but if we call a spade here, a lot of FFA chapters are in rural communities that are either majority or in some cases maybe exclusively Caucasian, and there's not exactly discrimination taking place. There just isn't really diversity to grab in some of those communities. How do you reconcile FFA's diversity and inclusion efforts with that reality of kind of where a lot of your membership comes from?
Well, I think that goes back, Spencer, to what I said earlier, and that is that we believe that those ag education programs and FFA chapters should truly reflect the communities in which they reside. And so if a community in a rural area is primarily of Caucasian race, clearly that's the demographic that our program will serve. I think the real issue that we see is as an example, there are 1,080,000 young people that study agricultural education in our country. 760,000 of those young people are FFA members. we're missing out on 320,000 young people. Why is that? Recently, both the state of Oregon and the state of Georgia fully affiliated. In other words, they developed their own internal plans so that every one of their students in their state agricultural education programs could become FFA members. And in the state of Georgia alone, about 50% of their new members were students of color. And so we look at the previous situation, certainly half of the members in Georgia were not in that demographic. And so we ask ourselves the question, what are we missing in our agricultural education programs that isn't attracting young people of color to our program? But I also, again, want to state, I think that inclusion, diversity, and equity is much more than just race and ethnicity. And it's all those other things that we think about that create a welcoming place for people that may not look the same, act the same, have the same background, but have a place in agriculture and have a place in agricultural education and FFA.
So as you kind of look around and assess kind of your current status quo, for lack of a better phrasing, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, where do you think are the gaps, the areas for improvement? Where do you think are the areas where FFA can really grab onto in this effort? Where do you think are those big areas for improvement?
Well, when we released our 55 or 56 point roadmap not long ago, we outlined some of the specific areas that we feel are important on a national basis as a reflection of who we are as FFA. One is, we don't want people to think that we are an overtly political organization, because we're not. In fact, we can't be. And I think the misunderstanding is often that if you're having a conversation about sociological issues and inclusion, diversity, and equity, somehow that's equated to be something political. And that is not our intent and not what we believe. We believe we're just trying to do the right thing. We're doing subtle things that we think are important. Oftentimes people think of FFA as the organization when we have an event that celebrates through the playing of only country music, when we know that many of our members enjoy all genres of music. And so we're trying to be more reflective of that. In our media materials, we're trying to be more reflective of the students that are truly representative of FFA membership. And we want to assure that we are welcoming to individuals from all various religious faiths, or even if there are young people that elect not to follow a religious preference, that there's still a place for them in our organization.
Obviously, you and many of the people that are watching this know that earlier this summer there was a matter of a personnel matter within FFA regarding the dismissal of an officer for some previously used comments regarding that could potentially run afoul of an organization's diversity and inclusion language and efforts. What did you learn from, not only the internal conversations that I imagine were very plentiful, but also I imagine the external conversations that you had with stakeholders were also very plentiful. What did that experience teach you about where FFA is on diversity and inclusion and where it has yet to go?
Well, we learned a number of things, and I think if you look at 2020 in a broad sense, we've all learned a lot this year about a society that has differing views on a lot of different areas. And I think in the end, and what I hope is we can all agree that those that provide food, fiber, natural resources for consumers can still be celebrated and honored in and of themselves for the work that the American farmer and the agricultural system does every day. The situation this summer, very unfortunate. And I think that certainly one of the things that we learned, and we didn't initiate, I would say, the inclusion, diversity, and equity work because of that. We were in the midst of that going back all the way to 2017, but we found that maybe we hadn't moved quickly enough. Maybe we hadn't been declarative enough about the importance of those issues. I think we learned that from a a national officer selection process, that we can do a more effective job. And at the time, we said we need to do a better job of vetting candidates and doing background evaluations of those young people, and we need to work with states that nominate those candidates. And we have, in fact, done that. We have really revamped the national officer selection process to, we think, be more thorough and continue to be fair and give every candidate an even shot to be selected to be in that very prestigious office. But what I hope we've learned is that we can take some steps from this point forward to be even more effective and hopefully not have to be in a situation like that ever again.
Mm-hmm. So I guess going forward, anything we should be watching in terms of as farm broadcasters, as people that cover this organization at both the national and the local level, specifically when we're talking about diversity and inclusion. I'd like to talk sustainability coming up here in a little bit, but any near-term actions that we should be watching for on our part?
What I would ask your members to do, and those that are interested in FFA, is go to our website at FFA.org and look at our agricultural education for all roadmap. We recognize that not everyone agrees with that roadmap. We also recognize that not everyone agrees with the pace that we have been following on inclusion, diversity, and equity. Some believe we've gone too fast. Some believe we have gone too slowly. We believe that we need to be in a situation where we can make steady improvement in this area. So I would say continue to watch for the opportunities that we provide students and teachers for additional education, for continuing education. Watch the kind of activities that we provide at upcoming conferences like we do when we have Washington Leadership Conference or our State Officer Summit or our National FFA Convention, where we make deliberate efforts to address these kinds of subjects. We have initiated what we call our own internal audit process to assure that we are measuring the results of the work that we're doing on inclusion, diversity, and equity, and reporting that back on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. And we should probably let's call a spade and acknowledge the elephant in the room here. We're a couple of white guys talking about diversity and inclusion, Mark. I mean, and I say that to bring up the point of as you go forward with your efforts, who are the additional populations that you would like to bring into this conversation, either within FFA or externally?
Well, you're absolutely right, and I would also say that just because I am a heterosexual Caucasian male doesn't mean that I can't have an interest and hopefully have a very profound impact on inclusion, diversity, and equity. That being said, one of the first things we'll be doing next year is we're going to hire a dedicated position at National FFA that will work solely on inclusion, diversity, and equity work. So people can hold us accountable for that. We are as I mentioned, I am speaking and working with the faculty at North Carolina A&T University about the new Farmers of America. We have a good deal of diversity reflected in the external consultants that are working with us. We have also worked diligently with the Native American population to try to identify how we can bring agricultural education and FFA to Native Americans and the places where they reside and where they have an interest in agriculture. So we're reaching out to a number of groups, and in addition, we're also working with what are called the AERO groups, the Ag Education Related Organization, those that train teachers for classroom instruction, the state staff that oversee ag education and FFA in their states, as well as the teacher organization that engages with teachers on continuing education. So number of different areas that I think an old white guy like I can have an impact on. And, you mentioned that I was in agribusiness for a long time. Those that are in agribusiness will tell you that we dealt with these same issues in industry. And I think we have reached a point, I certainly feel it from our sponsors and donors, where they are very supportive of the work that we're doing, and they want us to proceed on. And they also want us to proceed on, as I mentioned earlier, with our sustainability work. That's critical to the work they're doing.
Well, and on that front, that kind of pivots nicely into some lines of questions on that, because I always find it interesting covering the sustainability conversation, because it's one of those things that means all things to all people. And there's, of course, the lack of a formalized definition of just what in the heck it is. So I guess when FFA is talking about its sustainability efforts, what is the definition? What is the end goal that is kind of guiding those efforts?
Well, I think that those of us that have spent a lot of time in sustainability and have studied it can look to the definition that was provided by the United Nations. And I believe it was in the Brundtland Report back in 1987, so a long time ago. And that definition, if I interpret it as a kindergartner, I would say it basically says, how about we put everything back the way we found it and try not to use more than we provide back. And those are the kind of guiding principles that we want to be able to work through with our members. We also believe that there's an opportunity for FFA itself to be a more sustainable organization. We've all achieved Zoom fatigue, and we've all had COVID-19 fatigue. But the fact is that we can see the impact on the environment. We can see the impact on carbon emissions. We can see the impact on a climate basis when we are all not driving around in our automobiles, and when we are paying attention to having a more sustainable society. And so I think that those kinds of things are a nice pivot point for us moving into 2021. And our young people are very interested in this. I don't subscribe to the notion that ruminant animals are the cause of all the greenhouse gas emissions. Sorry, I don't buy that. There's a small percentage of that is impacted. But we want our members to understand the science and to be able to identify how they, whether it's in their work experience program or in their FFA chapter, how can they have an impact on sustainability in agriculture?
Well, and you touched on this in the diversity inclusion conversation as well, in that FFA by law, I'm fairly certain is by law, needs to be apolitical. And we start talking about sustainability and environmental concerns and everything else. You get pretty close, if not touching legal, you're legal adjacent, or law adjacent. How do you thread that needle of informing your members of things that they can do to be more sustainable in production agriculture and in their daily lives, but still not advocating for some particular piece of legislation that might achieve more sustainable outcomes?
Well, I think, Spencer, I think that's one of the things that we do pretty well in FFA, is that particularly, and you mentioned advocacy, we try very hard not to train and teach our students what to advocate for and what position to take. Our view is they need to learn how to make a case for their beliefs. And that is the way that we believe that young people can help advance agriculture, and particularly sustainability in agriculture in this case. I think it's unfortunate that issues like this have in our society today have taken on the connotation of politics. I'm not a politician, and you're right. Our federal charter says that we and I have to remain apolitical. But when it comes to using appropriate tillage practices, when it comes to cover crops, when it comes to identifying how we can make less trips across the field, how we can improve supply chains, how we can deal with food waste. I don't know of any other industry that could survive very long with a 40% loss of their end product through waste. I don't consider those to be political issues. Those are, in many cases, just good economic practices for producers and for our society. And so if our students can understand that, and if they can help contribute in their own SAE, supervised experience programs, If through their degree programs, at some point they identify what they've done in order to make their practices more sustainable, I think we get people thinking about this subject. And I never tell our young people that they're responsible for fixing everything. I just ask them that they join with us to identify how collectively we can address some of these issues.
So do you think this at the national level, do you think this stays at kind of the thought leadership and the conversation, coalition level, or does it trickle down into, perhaps somebody on their crop production proficiency getting bonus points for using cover crops? Does it get to, that level of the organization as well?
We haven't had that discussion. So I wouldn't anticipate as we sit here today that because someone does something more sustainable than a competitor in a particular award area, that they would get more or less points depending on what they're doing. Because I think we've done a good job in those programs of evaluating the totality of what they're presenting. I just think if part of that totality can be how are they impacting sustainability in agriculture? Do they understand it? Have they identified ways, measurable ways that they can impact it? This should be a learning experience for our young people that they can then take and employ as they move into college, as they move into careers, or they identify if they want to, in fact, strongly advocate for these kinds of issues in the future.
So, Mark, I know we've covered a couple of bases pretty thoroughly here, but I guess if as we kind of trail off in our conversation, if I could have you kind of zoom out and look at everything that comes across your desk on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, I guess kind of a two-part question. When you think about everything going on within the organization, one, what keeps you up at night, and two, what makes your rest easy?
Spencer, I sleep pretty well. Fortunately, there's not a lot of things that keep me awake. I am in the unique position of working with really extraordinary young people, extraordinary teachers in the classroom, and people that truly have the best interests of those teachers and students at heart. Clearly, there are disagreements. Clearly, I get my share of emails that provide very direct and constructive criticism, and we learn from that. And I take those very, very seriously. But just last week, I got an email from a young lady, a young African-American girl that had achieved the American degree. And she wrote a very nice email complimenting us on our inclusion, diversity, and equity efforts, that FFA was in fact a place where she felt very comfortable and very welcomed, and that she felt that, despite the difficulties we faced this summer, that at least from her perspective, we'd handled things okay. Once in a while when we hear that, that's very endearing, and those are the kinds of things that we appreciate. What I want to make sure of is that FFA remains a fiscally sound organization. We have retired about $8 million in debt over the last 3 years. FFA today is debt-free. That provides a lot greater flexibility in the way that we manage an organization like this, that we don't have to service significant amounts of debt. So I don't, even though I didn't lay awake worrying about it, I would tell you that I thought about it until I fell asleep some nights. And so that's a good situation for us to be in. We just want to continue to be great stewards of the resources that we have. We want to continue to develop great young people, and the teachers in the classrooms are the ones doing it. We just hopefully are providing resources at a national level that can help them in that regard.
Again, what was the membership number you threw out earlier? 700, was it 760?
760,113, if we want to be right down to the specifics. And that is a significant number. That's a number, I think over the last 10 years, we've grown somewhere in the area of 40%.
I can actually help you on that, because I remember way back in my infancy in 2010 and 2011, I wore a blue jacket myself that said South Dakota Association on the back of it, and the number I remember the number is burned into my brain. It was 523,306, I believe.
Okay.
So that's a measurable growth,
well, it is, and even back in the 80s, some of us old timers remember the difficult agricultural economics of the 1980s. FFA membership dropped to about 350,000 back in the 80s. I don't think you were born yet, Spencer.
I was not
when that took place, but I was, and I remember those days. So the fact that we are still around, growing and thriving, and working hard to remain relevant in a world where there's a lot of things to grab the attention of young people, but fortunately we still have a good number of them that want to hone their leadership skills through their ag education classes.
Well, obviously, and that growing membership number is, obviously indicative of an organization that means so much to so many, and a lot of people are grateful for the work that you're doing. And I think I can speak on behalf of NAFB when I say that I'm grateful for you stopping by and chatting a little bit about some of the things on the FFA portfolio here today, Mark.
Well, Spencer, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity and the very kind invitation to be with you and your members. And I wish you all the best on this virtual convention that you're celebrating.
Well, thanks again, Mark, and thanks to all of you for sticking with us through this conversation. And we also want to express our appreciation to Indigo Ag for sponsoring this Newsmaker session. Also, special thanks to Pivot Bio for sponsoring our afternoon refreshment break. Thank you for all of your support of our members and convention, and appreciate all of you sticking along, as I said, with this conversation. And again, appreciate all of our supporters for their backing of NAFB.